The injector was already in my hand when I caught her watching me instead of the wall, and I held the dose back a half-second longer than the chart allowed. 6 years I had worked the night rotation in the lower annex of Greymark Hold, and in 6 years Subject 6 had never once tracked my hands. She tracked the injector, the food slot, the door, never me. That night she held my eyes the whole way across the cell, and the thin blue-white veins along her throat brightened and dimmed, like something trying to remember a language. I logged the dose as administered. I did not administer it. Nobody designed Greymark to be cruel. They designed it to be quiet. 40 years ago, in the last bad winter of the old armistice, somebody decided the surest way to keep a war from restarting was to keep its supposed cause asleep, fed and unseen. A juvenile dragon pulled out of a border skirmish, voice box scarred in the crossfire, filed under Subject 6, and a sedation schedule instead of a name. I came to the job the way most people come to jobs like it. Needed the pension, didn't ask enough questions the first year, asked too many after that and got told to keep them to myself. She was pale slate blue, narrow through the shoulders even for a juvenile, wing membranes thin enough to see the late shift's fluorescence through when she stretched them. The bioluminescence was the only part of her nobody had managed to dampen. I started writing the patterns down on the back of my clipboard sheets because I didn't have anything better to do at 3 in the morning, and because some nights the brightening felt less like reflex and more like she was trying to say something to the only person in the room. So I said something back. 2 slow pulses of my penlight off, the closest I could come to a hello. She went rigid. Then her throat answered 3 pulses, fast, frantic almost, and I understood with a cold drop in my stomach that in 6 years nobody had ever answered her at all. I started calling her Sale, just in my own head, because Subject 6 wasn't a name you could be kind to. The penlight conversations became the only part of the shift I didn't dread. A pulse pattern for hungry, one for cold, one, repeated on nights the overhead lights buzzed loud, that I came to understand meant don't leave yet. I logged full sedation every time and gave her 3/4 doses, then half, watching the chart's tolerance band like a woman walking a fence line in the dark. The improvement showed up first in small things. She stopped flinching at the slot, started arranging her one blanket instead of just lying on it, held my gaze without the chemical fog clouding it over. It showed up in the readings too, eventually, which is the part I hadn't planned for. 3 months in, Director Wells called me into her office with a printout I wasn't supposed to see upside down on her desk. Subject 6's bioluminescent activity, she said, had gone from background noise to something the old monitoring equipment was now calling structured, coherent, a pattern resolving instead of degrading, for the first time since intake. Compliance wanted that fixed before anyone outside Greymark noticed a 40-year quiet signal starting to talk again. There was a procedure for it. Neurological dampening, permanent, scheduled for the following week. Director Wells didn't say it cruelly. She said it the way you'd report a leak that needed sealing before it became a flood. I told her the dampening equipment in the lower annex was still flagged from last year's audit and needed recalibration first. That bought 4 days. I used every one of them. The first night, the recalibration tech assigned to the dampening unit came down early and nearly caught me with the penlight still in my hand. I slid it into my coverall pocket and told him the panel needed another pass, that I'd flag him when it was ready. He believed me because nobody had ever had a reason not to. I stood in the corridor afterward with my pulse going harder than it had any business going over a man checking a junction box, and understood properly, for the first time, how much I had already decided to risk for a creature who couldn't say my name. On the second night I sat on the floor outside the glass instead of standing at the chart rail, because my knees had stopped pretending they could do an 8-hour shift standing. Sale's veins lit up at that, a long, slow pulse I hadn't cataloged yet, and she came down off the shelf she slept on and pressed one slate blue claw flat against the glass at the height of my shoulder. I put my palm against it from my side. The glass was cold enough to ache. On the third night, the facility's old long-range monitors, installed decades ago to watch for exactly this and never once tripped, picked up an answering signal from somewhere past the perimeter fence. Faint, directional, closing. Wells came down herself to read it off the panel, jaw tight, and told the night crew to prep for a possible incursion. I didn't correct her. I just kept my 4 days. On the fourth night, I gave Sale no dose at all and sat with my back against the glass while she paced, agitated, brighter than I'd ever seen her, throat flashing a pattern too fast for me to follow. I told her, out loud, the way you talk to somebody who can't understand the words but might understand the voice under them, that whatever was coming, I wasn't going to let them put her back to sleep before it got here. It arrived an hour before dawn. Not an incursion. A landing, 3 dragons, adult, deep amber bronze, settling onto the access pad with a control that made the perimeter sensors look foolish for ever calling it hostile. Wells met them with half the night staff and a sidearm nobody drew. I stood at the annex door because nobody had told me to leave, and because Sale's claws were against the glass again, pulsing one pattern over and over, fast and bright. Don't leave yet. The eldest of the 3, scarred along one flank, eyes the color of old gold, didn't speak to Wells first. She came to the glass. She looked at Sale for a long moment, and something in her posture broke that I don't have a human word for. Then she looked at me. "You are the one who answered her," she said, "not a question." I said I was. She told Wells, in a voice that needed no raising, what the old armistice file had buried under 40 years of classification. The child behind the glass was never the cause of anything. She was the high seat's second daughter, lost in the same border skirmish that had supposedly required her detention, and the treaty clause nomming her a necessary hostage had been someone's convenient lie, repeated so long it had calcified into policy. There had been no war to prevent. Only a child nobody came looking for in the right place, until her own light learned to speak again and carried far enough to be heard. Wells didn't argue. I think some part of her had been waiting 40 years for someone to tell her she could stop. They opened the cell properly, not with the injector tray but with their own claws working the seal by hand, gentle as anything. Sale came out unsteady, the way you'd expect after 6 years standing on chemical legs, and she didn't go first to her own kind. She came to me, lowered her head until her scarred throat was level with my chest, and held the pulse pattern there, slow, steady, the one I'd learned meant don't leave yet, until I understood she wasn't asking me to stay forever. She was thanking me for the nights I hadn't. The eldest dragon offered me passage, honors, a title in their tongue that didn't translate clean. I said no to all of it gently, because I had a sister 2 towns over and a garden I'd let go to weeds for 6 years of night shifts I couldn't talk about. What I asked for instead was 5 more minutes with the penlight, so I could teach Sale one more pattern before they took her home, the one that just means goodbye, friend, not gone. She learned it in one try, lit it back to me twice before she lifted off the pad into a sky just starting to go gray with morning and kept lighting it, smaller and smaller, until the dark swallowed the distance between us. I clocked out at 7. Director Wells didn't ask me to falsify a single report. I think the truth was easier to carry once somebody finally said it out loud. I went home, slept 4 hours, and spent the rest of the day pulling weeds in a garden that had been waiting on me a long time too, and found I didn't mind the waiting now nearly so much, knowing what could come of it.